In this episode of the How to Do Your 20s podcast, I'm talking with Terry from the Build My Online Store podcast, where I'm actually currently co-hosting. And in this episode, we're going to talk about everything you need to know to make your first $1,000 with an online business. And this is going to be the first part of a multi-part series. This first part's the first $1,000. The next part, I'm going to talk with a different entrepreneur about how to make your next $100,000. And then finally, I'm going to talk with a different entrepreneur about how to make your first $1,000,000 with an online business. So this is really all the information you need to know, at least for a starting point, to be extremely successful with online business. And this episode is a great starting point for anybody that hasn't really started their own online business, is kind of considering it, thinking about, what should I do? This is the episode for you. At the end of this episode, I'm going to have a soundbite from Michael Jordan, and it basically is Michael Jordan talking about what's made him so successful. And what he says it is all the times that he's failed. He talks about how he's failed at this and how he's failed at that, and that is exactly why he's succeeded. And I think this is really relevant to what we're talking about today. A lot of people are scared to start a business because they think that they're going to fail. So they won't even take that risk. But when you listen to that little soundbite, and it's so true, you realize that if you never fail, you're never going to succeed. You got to take that chance. You got to take that chance on failure to really do something big. But with that being said, let's get to the episode, and here we go. Welcome to another episode of the How to Do Your 20s podcast. And in this episode, I'm having the man that got me started in podcasting, Terry from Build My Online Store. And I currently co-host, the podcast with him over there at Build My Online Store. And he's an amazing guy. He's actually got his own e-commerce business and, of course, the amazing podcast that you should go check out. So, Terry, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, how's it going, guys? My name is Terry. Like Travis said, we both run another podcast called Build My Online Store. I brought him on board probably 2 months ago, so it's cool to change the format. It started out as an interview show, and now we kind of have a co-host thing. And now I'm on his show to talk about how to get started. If you're looking to start a store, what are the first steps you need to take, and kind of the baby steps you need to kind of get the ball rolling. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I think it's going to go for about an hour or so, and hopefully you'll find this helpful.
So, Terry, you actually have an online store too, though, right?
Yes, my store is called ballerleather.com. So we sell high-end men's wallets made from genuine Italian leather. And yeah, basically really slim minimalist wallets at ballerleather.com.
So the first topic I want to talk about is coming up with an idea. So how did you come up with the idea for that?
One was it was kind of scratching my own itch. The first product was actually a passport holder. So since when I was growing up as a kid, I grew up in the U.S. and Asia, spent a little bit of time in Europe, and so as you run around between countries, at the airport you have your tickets, passports, foreign currencies, ID cards, bank cards, things to carry around. And I didn't really have something that could keep everything organized, so I figured, hey, why don't I just try to make something and see what happens? So I kind of went on Pinterest, found some products that I liked, some designs that I liked, combined them together in a Photoshop file, and I looked for a supplier that could make a sample. And then there we went. We had the first one made, and then I showed it to some friends. I got some pre-orders, and we got the ball rolling that way.
Very cool. So I'm looking at the show notes we have right here, and that kind of goes into training your brain to see opportunities. And so I think you wrote this down, right? What do you mean by this?
Yes. So a lot of times when you first get into this space, you look at Instagram or Facebook, like, oh, they IPO'd for $1 billion or $2 billion, they got bought out. Like you see these kind of one-time deals that where it's the tip of the iceberg, you don't see what happens underneath. And underneath every business or anything that's successful, there's a certain value proposition that it has. Either it solves a problem, and it's about training your brain to think about opportunities in the way that when people say, hey, I hate doing this, this sucks that my phone battery dies, or I wish I could go here faster, or things like that. So you got to train your brain to kind of think in the way that you can see opportunities, and part of that is kind of being observant, listening to other people, trying to figure out solutions. One framework that's useful is thinking as a producer rather than a consumer, right? So if you look at McDonald's, you go buy a hamburger, you buy a Big Mac meal, whatever, you go to Whole Foods, you are a consumer there, right? But as a producer, they're giving you the goods in exchange for money, and that's the switch you have to make when you first start out. So one way to do that, as Travis, you said, is to write out one idea a day, right? And these ideas may work, they may not work, but it's getting that daily practice down of writing down one idea.
Yeah, and actually, I want to talk about something you were talking about earlier in the whole idea of seeing the opportunity it's really powerful because a lot of people I talk to, they're like, well, I don't have any ideas for an e-commerce store. I'm like, is there anything that you can think of that you wish existed that doesn't exist? Or another thing that I think that's really interesting, this is a different way to look at it, is what products are out there that don't have good marketing? For instance, I have an idea. I'm not going to share it on the podcast because I'm hoping eventually I'll be able to do it. Actually, why not? I'll share it. So I have an idea for basically different types of like nut butters, and they exist out there like mixes. So like a walnut cashew nut butter, it exists out there, but I
Mm.
don't see anybody marketing it properly. Like when I think about that, there's not a website that comes to mind like, yeah, I'd go there to buy it. So that's an idea that I had is, hey, anything that you really want, you can make into your own e-commerce store. Now, to touch on the other thing you were talking about, the what I wrote down, the write down one idea a day. This is something I told my mom to do when we needed to come up for a name. I just said, all right,
Mhm.
write down one, because she kept saying, oh, eventually I'm going to sit down for a couple hours and think of a bunch of names. But the truth is that never comes. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think one thing to switch is that when you start a business, you shouldn't think about the money in the sense that that's not the thing you're chasing. Because if you think about it, when you go to like a concert, you go to the bowling alley, you pay $10 for a ticket, but the value you're getting is that experience of, throwing the ball at the pins or seeing this band play live, or even when you buy food, it's the nutrition you get for your body, right? So what can you offer that people would trade money for is kind of the switch that you have to make too. And then when you realize that there are different units of value, for example, like look at the Tesla car, right? It's like 100K, 200K. Well, A, it's an electric car. It's cool, but it's also the mental thing where people that drive a Tesla can say, hey, I'm a badass. I got to pre-order this. There's an emotional value that you can get from certain products too. So say when you buy a MacBook, obviously it's a piece of tech, but it also is an identity thing too. When you're not using a PC, you're saying there's a statement that reflects upon your identity too. So kind of think about what value you can offer as a producer, and instead of thinking as a consumer and where you can get money. Because if you're just asking people for money, well, what are they going to get, right? So
And that's interesting too, because something I've found is when you're thinking of these new ideas, asking people, hey, would you pay for this, isn't usually the right approach because your friends are like, yeah, that's a great idea. I'd spend $30 on that. But then a better approach is to be like, hey, okay, so if you'd spend $30 on it, will you give me the $30 and I'll give you the product? And a lot of times you'll find people have an excuse. They're like, oh, I left my wallet at home. Like as soon as you actually ask for the money, they're not willing to spend the money. So be careful the way you phrase the questions too when you're asking people, is my idea a good idea?
yeah, there was a Steve Jobs quote where he said, "People don't know what they want," but the flip side is that people don't know what they don't want until you ask them to pay for it. Right?
Yeah.
Because then once the money's on the line, then you're like, okay, do I really want this? Actually, no. Then I'll come up with some excuse, and it's not that it's their fault or you should be butthurt when you hear that. It should be you should look at yourself like, hey, what is wrong with my product, or am I targeting the wrong person with this thing too? So
Yeah. So, what do you think about keyword research when trying to find a new idea for an e-commerce business? Is that something that you'd recommend to people that are looking for an idea, or is that a little bit too old school?
so keyword research essentially is using a tool to see how many people search for a certain term in Google or Bing or Yahoo, and then you can see if there's enough demand to kind of see what is out there. So I think there's two sides to this. One, it's important, but it shouldn't be the sole reason you get into something because you can end up getting into a business that you're not interested in, like say baby strollers, right? I don't
Hmm.
have a baby, I don't have a wife, so why would I make a website about that? And imagine if I had to make a whole website about this for the next 5 years, like would I really want to be doing that? But whereas the other side is too is that you don't want to do something that there's completely no demand to, right?
Hmm.
So I think there's kind of a balance, and I don't really have a right answer, but I think most importantly, you just want to talk to people who are willing to give you money, and after that, the keyword research will kind of figure itself out from there.
Yeah, I think that having a general idea before you start doing that keyword research is the way to do it. Because the way it works is you can put into Google, there's a tool called the keyword tool, I believe, and you can say, okay, for instance, my company, dance clothing. Well, I can find out, oh, maybe the products that I thought we were going to sell aren't the right types of products. Maybe instead of, tutus, we should be selling dance pants. So I think it can really help you figure out what direction to take an already somewhat there idea.
Yeah, I think the way to look at it is to use it as a compass, but not as a map, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And another idea that I have, if you absolutely can't come up with an idea for an online business, is look around to the people surrounding you, see what kind of ideas they have, and start a partnership with them. Truth is, if you're smart enough to be listening to this podcast, or especially the Build My Online Store podcast, you're probably smart enough to figure out how to do an online store. It's not that hard. It just takes the ability to educate yourself, and it takes the ability to figure things out. And the truth is, you're probably surrounded by people that have great ideas. And this is how I started my business. My mom, in fact, I will say that when I first decided I'm absolutely going to start an online store, everybody came to me with their ideas. I probably had 4 to 5 opportunities of different people saying, oh, this is my idea for an online business. What do you think? Ultimately, I settled with what I thought would be the best one. So be open. I think really once you make that mindset switch of, I'm going to find an idea, you'll find that they kind of come to you.
Yeah, and I think one thing off a tangent here is that if you're not comfortable with your idea or not confident enough, you may want to look into like apprenticing under someone else that has who you want to be with. So if there's someone that has like an e-commerce store that's doing 5 million a year and you have completely no idea where to get started, like it actually might make sense to spend, a year under his or her wing to kind of learn everything on your own while you get paid to do it, and then you can kind of go from there too. But I think it depends on everyone's situation. If you're smart enough to listen to our podcast, you should probably go on it yourself. But if you're just out of college, not much experience, I'd probably consider that apprenticeship route too.
Yeah, actually, I talked with a friend of mine. He's a photographer in Buenos Aires, and what he said that he would do is basically work with better photographers for free. But the thing is that's really interesting, in Buenos Aires, they don't have that mindset. They want to get paid now. They don't have that long-term approach, and that's a really negative way to go through life. I really believe that you should see that, hey, if I worked for free for 100 hours for this big name e-commerce person, whatever, the knowledge is worth way more than that instant cash would be.
Yeah, because if you think about it, the amount of time it would take you to get to a certain level versus if you just took a dip, like on a skateboard down a half pipe, and then when you come out the other side, you get more power. In terms of like the trajectory, I think certain things like that, especially if you work for a really big person in the e-commerce space, like say, I don't know, Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever, Shopify, big commerce, you spend a year there, the amount of data and the people you'll meet there is probably better than more than you'll get a year on your own too. Especially when you start out, you probably make a lot of mistakes, things will move slower, you need to find people to keep your motivation up, things like that, roadblocks, things like that. Whereas if someone was guiding you, I think the trajectory over 5-10 years will be a lot different.
Gotcha. And I really do want to reiterate the idea of writing one idea down a day, because I've told this to a lot of my friends, and really, when you start doing that, your subconscious starts to think about ideas just during, normal day, like the normal just walking around. And I believe that a lot of people are like, oh, well, I want to sit down for 4 hours and figure out what my idea is going to be. The truth is, if you can't write down one idea a day, you're probably not that serious about it. And that's kind of how I determine if I'm going to help my friend out or not. I've had a couple different people tell me that, and I'm like, look, if I don't see you even writing down one idea a day that takes 5 seconds, you're probably not that serious about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, if we jump ahead a little bit, I think this goes down to what I wrote where it's interest versus commitment. So when you're interested in something, you do it during your free time, but when you're committed, you have no excuse. You just do it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a good filter to see, like that way to see who's actually serious and not joking about this too.
Agreed. So any other tips that you'd have? Like, what do you tell people when they come up to you and say, hey, I want to start an e-commerce business, but I don't have an idea?
I say usually those people, not like, oh, those people, but it's more like the way they approach you, you can already tell how committed they are. Because if they were really committed, they wouldn't ask you this question. Does that make sense? If they were asking you to like handhold them, I would give them some bones, but I want to see that, hey, here's what I've done first, here's what didn't work, and like, hey, what do you think? Right? Then there's a more like kind of thing. There's more incentive for me to talk to them, because if it's just like, hey, build a store for me, I'm like, well, why should I do that? Why don't I just do it for myself then? Right?
Yeah. So is that a question that you've had a lot of people email you and
Yeah,
ask?
I get a few questions, but usually I'll reply. But usually you can tell how far they are. They're just thinking about it. They're not sure yet. And I'm like, hey, just check out this, check this out, check out these 3 episodes, and then come back to me later. And then some of them do, but most of them usually don't.
Gotcha.
Because it's just the idea they had, and they weren't really committed to it too. And I want to focus on people that are committed, like put people in our mastermind, and the e-commerce mafia, and all that stuff. So.
All right. So the next step is figuring out who your buyer is. So with leather, how did you figure out who your buyer is going to be?
So I put up a sales page and I sent it to like 40, 50 friends, and then we got about like 20 orders on the first batch.
That's a pretty good conversion rate.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah. And my pre-order price was $47. So we got about like 2,000 almost for the first pre-order. And then after that, it was going to like men's fashion blogs, people that travel a lot. And one thing that I found helpful is that if you go to Amazon, you can see in certain feedback sections because some people write really long reviews. They'll write like, "Hey, when I was at the airport using this product, I found this to be helpful," and then you can kind of start building a profile based off actual feedback. And what's good is that Amazon feedback, they have verified purchases where people can actually only leave reviews if they actually bought it. But even then, like reviews are pretty helpful too, even if they're not verified, just to get an idea of what's good about the product, what's bad about the product. And the gems are usually in the negative reviews because that's when you realize, hey, I can take this and turn it into something better when I make my own thing. And the good stuff, when they have good reviews, you can use that in your copy, like the words they use to describe this product, the way how they're happy, things like that, what problem is solved, and kind of get data from actually people that have spent money instead of just random people to survey on the internet.
And did you use this for Baller Leather?
Yes, for one of the newer password holders, yeah, I did.
So you would just go through and basically look at other competing like passport holders and see
Yeah,
what kind of features they liked and
yeah. So they would say like, "Hey, this leather smells funny. I hate this thing. It makes my passport bend in a weird shape." Or like, "Hey, it can't fit this. It can't fit that. I need more space to hold this and that. I need something that holds my SIM cards. Where do I put my foreign currencies when I go around? I need to put receipts, things like that." So kind of over time, you just make a list and you categorize them into like overlaps, right? Because if you look at like 100, 200 reviews, you're gonna see like you're gonna start seeing 10 to 20 that are basically the same thing. And then when you tally those up, it's a big enough problem that you should build into your features too.
now, something I've heard is the best reviews to look at are the 3-star reviews, approximately, I guess, 2 to 4 star, because a lot of the 1-star reviews are just, oh, this product sucks. I hate everything about it. And the 5 stars, like, oh, it's amazing. I love everything about it. Do you find that to be true, or do you look at all the reviews?
Yeah, usually the 3 to 4 star ones are the most candid and honest ones.
Mm.
But even then, it takes because everyone's experience is different. When they get something, maybe they're in a bad mood. Like you got to filter for that too, right? And it's just a matter of getting enough reviews to get an objective view that hey, if this guy said this, are there like 10 other people saying it too, or at least is the way he's writing the review like is he like being really candid? Because some people, if you write like all caps, it's like you're yelling,
Yeah.
right? So you got to try to like put yourself in their shoes, like writing this stuff. And some of them will do video reviews too. Is pretty really helpful too. But I think reviews is just one section. Another way to look at it is to actually go to forums. We're gonna just move along here because I think forums, like nowadays, like most people who are hardcore about a certain topic usually are in a forum, either on Reddit in the subreddit, or they have their forums like cultofmac.com or like one of these things, like gaming forums or things like that. And these things are really underground, where in the sense that you can't just go in and be like, "Hey guys, I'm selling this thing," because you'll get basically banned or if not ostracized right away, right? But I think if you can build a profile in there over time, like you can actually get your early customers there really easily too. So that's what one of our friends did at Natural Stacks. Ben, he actually sells supplements, right? I know you use one of his products, Siltep.
Hmm.
He started out on a smart drugs podcast, like a nootropics podcast, and he was kind of talking to people within forums on what they were doing and eventually building that early adopter phase too.
That's really interesting. I actually have tried that with my business, the dance clothing business.
Yeah.
The problem is, first off, dance moms are mean. Like, I've asked some questions that I thought were pretty fair questions, and the responses were just like, "Who are you to ask these questions?" But I will say I found out some interesting stuff, even just talking with those people and thinking about what they're interested in. And one example is I started looking at the other websites that people in my demographic are shopping at. So like a Macy's, a Victoria's Secret, all that kind of different things, and saw, hey, how do these websites look? Because they look very different than websites geared towards
Yeah.
men. And it's really interesting. And I figure if my demographic is using the Macy's website and Lululemon, whatever, they know how to use these websites pretty well because those companies are obviously spending a lot of money figuring it out. So I tried to make my website kind of reflect that same kind of feeling. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
know.
one thing also with forums is that you could sort by threads and look at the most commented threads or most viewed,
Mm.
just to get an idea without, posting something dumb and getting your thread shut down.
So going back to Ben from Natural Stacks, did he actually post like advertisements, or was it more just about research?
No, I think he was just private messaging people within the forums individually instead of being like, "Hey, here's what we're selling and here's what we're going to do." Because I think that comes off as too intrusive for a lot of forums because the communities are very tight knit, and so I think that's
Mm.
that's what he did.
Interesting. I wonder if that's something. This is kind of jumping ahead a little too far, but if I
Yeah,
wonder if you could basically do that and ask people about feedback for the look of your website and say like, hey, we're a new, for instance, with my company, a dance clothing company. What do you think about this? Is there anything that we could add to it that
yeah,
you think it's missing?
yeah. And I think he went a step further. Said, "Hey, I saw you posted in this thread, really cool thread. I wanted to get your feedback also on this." So there was some context rather than a cold email to someone.
Very cool. I see you also wrote down magazine ads, paid ads, and competitors are using.
Yes. So one thing that's interesting is that if someone's advertising in an ad, there's a chance that they see an ROI in there. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there, right?
Hmm.
So basically, when you look at like say a magazine called Monocle, Economist, I don't know, 17 Cosmo, like there's a reason why lipstick people are advertising there, and what the demographic does based on based on the demographic who reads that magazine, you can get some data. So basically, once you get a certain level of publications, you can go to their website and look at their media kits. And the media kits usually have demographic info on who their readership are, circulation, age, income, location, things like that. And what's cool is that you can actually take that and use that to do maybe Facebook ads or take that data and just repurpose it into something else down the line too.
Wow, that's a great tip. So you're saying basically the magazines have media kits and they'll tell you exactly what the demo is for that magazine,
Yes, they
correct?
have media kits because they want to sell advertisements. And the
Yeah.
kit basically is like a press package that says, "Hey, our magazine gets circulated to 100,000 people every month. Here's their age, like 80% men, 20% women. Their income's over 100K. They live in New York, San Francisco, whatever, LA." And then you can use that to say, "Hey, is this kind of my demographic?" If it's not, you can find something else, right? So this is data it's all on their website. It's like these media kits, they're just like PDF files of like who they are and their circulation data.
That's awesome tip. I never even knew about that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So you can go to like say like a cheerleading magazine and then download their media kit and then just see who's actually reading it and get some more info on either your Facebook targeting, AdWords, or things like that too.
Huh. So any other tips on figuring out who your buyer is?
Uh, That's one thing that's powerful is that if you do have some friends who buy from you, ask them where they shop from, either boutique stores or online stores, because then you get an idea of what people in the same mindset are also shopping at too. And then you can find out, all right, if they shop at this boutique store to buy shoes, well, then who goes to that store? And then you go to their Facebook page, see what people are commenting on, and kind of get an idea too. What kind of photos are they posting? Who's liking it? And things like that. So I think it's a long process, but the info is out there. It's just a matter of using it in the creative way to get info and to extract things.
You know, and that kind of brings up another point for me. Figuring out who your buyer is, a really great way to do this is asking people in person, just going to who you think your buyer is. And we kind of touched on this, but having people fill out some kind of sheet in exchange for like a free product or like 20 bucks. It's, 2014, but it doesn't mean you can't have a human to human conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
that's
but we can
that's
get
a
it.
yeah.
We can talk about that later on the marketing side of things, I guess.
Sure. I think though, even when you're trying to figure out if an idea is worth pursuing, you should definitely talk to people if you have the opportunity. But all right, let's get into the first steps. Let's say you are happy with your idea and you're figuring out, you've already figured out who your buyer is. My first recommendation always to anybody about anything online is go to GoDaddy.com, get a 99-cent domain name. And the way to do that is if you type in Google 99-cent domains, I believe, or 99-cent GoDaddy domains, you can get a domain from GoDaddy for $1. And if you're serious about doing anything, even if you're not, for $1, you got to go get a domain.
Yeah, and The domain's the easy part, right? The hard part is getting people to give you money, and don't get stuck on a domain too long because you can always change the name if you don't like it, right? This is just taking that first step to kind of, to the thousand steps that you need to take. This is just like the very, very first step,
It
I think, that
shows
we're talking about.
commitment to me. Like I put it off for a long time with a couple different sites that I've tried to have, but now it's like as soon as I have an idea that I think's relatively good for $1, I'll go buy that. And I also use that as barometer for my friends who to see if they're serious or not about online business. If someone comes to me and says, "Oh, I think what you do is really cool. I want to start a website." I'm like, "Well, okay, what's your idea?" 99% of the time they do have an idea, and when they have that idea, I'm like, "All right, do you have the domain name?" And about 80% of the time, they're like, "Oh, no, I don't. I don't have the." I'm like, "Why not?" They're like, "Well, I'm not sure about it." I'm like, "All right, well, I don't want to spend an hour of my time trying to convince you to do this if you're not even that serious."
Yeah, and sometimes when they say I'm not sure about it, is that they're looking to you for validation of their idea when you should be talking to customers. One of the ways to do that is to have a website that people can go to. When you can talk to them, you can send them to there, right?
Uh,
So
yeah, absolutely. And I think the next step is getting some kind of hosted shopping cart platform. And the way I viewed this is when I was first starting my business, figured, okay, it's about, I think it was like 20, 25 bucks a month. I don't know, it's not really important. And I figured, okay, I'm willing to spend that 25 bucks a month, whether or not I have a site. Now, if I don't have a site, that's a lazy fee. I'm willing to spend $25 for being a lazy, piece of shit and not pursuing my dreams. And I think it's money well spent because as soon as you start spending money out of your pocket, you're going to realize, oh, wow, I actually should probably try to build a site on here.
yeah, instead of letting it just drain your bank account away, right?
Yeah, I have friends that do similar things with the gym. They say, okay, I'm gonna spend 50 bucks a month on the gym. If I don't go, that $50 is a fat fee. And I'm like, I love that kind of mindset because it'll get you in there, you know?
Yeah. Well, one thing if you want to start early is that there's a platform I use called trycelery.com. So try celery like the vegetable. Basically, you can put a product on there and you have like a one-page sales page, and you can actually start collecting orders based on that. So you don't have to build like an about us page, shipping information. Like, you just put it on there, and then it's like a thing you can start sending to friends. And that's actually what I did to get pre-sales because basically they just take like a 2% fee, but there's no like monthly charge, so you can really test an idea super fast off that. If you just have a few photos, a video, and some copy, that you can just put a product on there too.
So you use that when you just send it out to your friends, right?
Yeah, yeah. But later on, you want your own domain because you're basically hosting it on their platform.
Hmm.
So it's like a trycelery.com/product slash whatever your name is, right? But you want your own domain down the road too. But if you're just looking to test something really quick, this is probably the fastest way I've ever seen to actually start collecting orders.
Did you do that for the mastermind too?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I noticed that. I thought that was really interesting because
Yeah.
for those people that don't know, that's how I met Terry. Was a mastermind group for online stores, and a mastermind is basically just about 4 to 6 people that get together. In this case, online, and talk about, for this instance, online business because we all had our own online businesses. So it's like a way to talk with other people that are facing similar problems or have already faced that problem.
Yeah, so basically, I use that platform to pre-sell some tickets, and you can literally set something up in like an hour, if not less. To like, take, if you have a picture of it already, you can just put it up and then start selling it right away. So, there's no need to have this technical stuff hold you back. It's more of the mental thing in your head when things don't work out, and what would you do if it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah, that brings up to actually the next point, which is put up MVP, and this is an MVP. It's a most or what is it?
Minimum viable
There we
product
go.
slash
Minimum,
page, I guess.
yeah, minimum viable product. So this is an idea that a lot of the pros use is just try to create the simplest thing of what your product is or what you're trying to sell and test it. See right away, is this going to work or is it not going to work? And
Yeah.
there's a,
And,
go ahead.
and I think one thing I think makes some people a little uncomfortable is collecting money up front for something that doesn't exist yet. Now, I certainly went through that. But if you think about it, you pay for a magazine a year in advance, usually, right? You don't get all 12 at once. And you pay for a concert first in advance, too, right? In some places, even at a restaurant, you pay for the money first and then you get your food after, right? Like when you're buying it from a food truck. Right? So it's not like it's mentally rewiring your head that, hey, collecting money up front is actually okay as long as you can deliver. And if you can't, you just give them the money back. right? So I think that's one thing that kind of holds some people back is that, well, I can't put up an MVP until I actually have a product. Well, you actually should have the MVP to test if this product, you should even make it in the first place, because you can make it, but it might not be something that people will be willing to pay for, as we talked about earlier.
One of my favorite quotes as far as this goes is if you're not extremely embarrassed with the first version of your product, website, whatever it is, then you waited too long. And I found that to be true in my own life. With my website, I look back at the website and I'm like, wow, that was so bad. But if I would have waited till it was perfect to quote unquote launch it, I would have pulled all my hair out because even getting that MVP was kind of tough for me, much less, it's never going to be perfect. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Just do something.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as perfect too. You just and the thing is you get to that stage better and better by talking to people, interacting with them, taking feedback, negative feedback, positive feedback over time. And first you need something to give them like just to show. So, you got to put yourself out there, put an MVP out there, and then just let people rip you apart and take it from there.
Yeah, I look at like Facebook or Facebook's a great example. They're still changing the way they do things. They're a multi-billion dollar company and it's still not quote unquote perfect. And yeah, like you just said, just put something out there. What about Kickstarter or Indiegogo? I know this is something you are getting into right now.
Yeah, so one thing when you start a business is you need money, right? And the money can come from three ways. Either you have your own money, you put it on your credit card, you have money in your savings to start something, or you take investor money, right? Like what the Silicon Valley guys, venture capitalists are doing. You take angel money, whatever, but you give a percentage of your company in exchange for
Like
investor
Shark
money.
Tank.
And exactly, right? Now, the third way is to take your customers' money, right? Now, each three has their own pros and cons, but usually you want to take your customers' money, not in the sense that you're stealing from them, but you're offering a product and they're giving you money in an exchange of value because that's really what makes a business, right? Because you can invest your own money and you can have products that don't sell, and then you're stuck with all this inventory. And two, you can have investor money. You could still build something that won't sell, and you'll have investors, on your ass every day. Why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? They're kind of like a nanny overlooking you, right? And the customer money is usually the best because then your business is kind of more validated. It can grow into something more. Maybe it can, but at least it's a more sustainable path for individuals like us starting out. Now the difference is that if you're going to build like rockets, like Elon Musk, right? Like, there's no way you're going to use your own money. No way you're going to use your customers' money. Maybe you can if you're like working with NASA, but it'll be a lot of it is investor money. It depends on the business model you're going for. And usually for us, if you're listening to this, you're looking to do either consumer good, business to business good. Usually it's either your own money or customers' money is kind of where I'd advise people to. And crowdfunding is kind of a way to hack this because you get pre-sales from people, you also get customer money, and you also get kind of a marketing push in terms of a big splash when people start sharing this. So I think if you're doing a physical product starting out, you're building something completely from scratch. You don't really know who your customer is. First, this is kind of a good way to test something out without really risking a lot of money, only just maybe some sample costs and time and energy.
I know you did a whole episode on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and I just want to dig a little bit deeper into this. If you had to give
Yeah.
people just three quick tips, they're going to put up an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter page, three tips, what recommendations would you say that you need to make sure you do this? Any ideas?
I would say do the groundwork for Kickstarter campaigns. From what I've seen, I'm still in the process of one now, but depends when you see this, it might be live. But all the 80/20 is done beforehand in the sense that you have talked to press, you talk to your friends, you talk to your family, you have people that have done product reviews before the campaign starts. And then when it launches, you hit your goal in like the first week. And then after that, it's like the windfall. Because if you wait till you launch and then you email journalists, blogs, they might take 3 days to get back to you, and you got to go back and forth. And by that time, it's like halfway through the campaign and people are already distracted by something else. Whereas if you make a big splash beforehand, you do all the work beforehand, kind of front load it, and that's what I've seen everyone that's been successful do. And two is also for crowdfunding thing. I think it's important to know the community that you're serving in the sense that people on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, they've been around for probably 5 years now. They know that these projects are kind of new to the market. They're new businesses, they're new ideas. They'll have delays, they'll have supply chain issues. So I think one thing is also being transparent in your communications in terms of like, if you don't have anything to update, don't just sit there and go dark. Because you look at any big campaign, there's people complaining, hey, why are you guys hiding? Are you guys scamming our money? Why are you guys quiet now? Did you guys just run away, go to a vacation? So I think things like that being really upfront with people is also important. You can't just be like, hey, I'm going to make this, give me money, right? And you have to really think things through as a third step is that, hey, what are you going to do with manufacturing? What are you going to do with shipping? And what are you going to do with this? Because I think people want to see that you've thought about it, even though you haven't done it yet. But the sense that you've actually gone through the different steps is kind of a trust builder for them to support you with their money early on, even though you haven't built anything yet.
Nice. Okay, so the big ones are do all your marketing, get everything, all your ducks in a row before you blow up, and the second thing is be very transparent, correct?
Yeah, and then the third is to actually think through the whole process
Gotcha.
and be honest about that when you actually put it on your Kickstarter or Indiegogo page. And especially
And
like things that you see could be a problem, you might as well just say that because at least it shows people that, hey, this guy is not just a crazy artist with an idea. He actually thought about what could happen, go wrong, and here's what he's going to do. So, okay, maybe I'll give him my money.
yeah, no, I recently was talking with a guy that was launching a Kickstarter campaign. I'm like, what are you doing for marketing as far as, getting it funded? He's like, oh, I didn't really do anything. And I'm like, what do you mean? He raised $10,000 just from his friends and family and a couple other people. But I know this guy, if he would have actually done a little bit of marketing, could have blown it up.
Yeah, one thing with Kickstarter is a lot of people see it as a bank, and it's not the way to do it. It's like you got to have that tribe following first in some ways. You got to have that word of mouth built in, and then when you have the launch, then they all go there. It's not like you launch first and then you get people to go there because you're running out of time. Usually, it's campaigns are like what 30 days, if not 40 days. So,
Hmm.
I think the perspective of using Kickstarter is like, hey, you actually need to do the groundwork beforehand, and then launch day is just is just like a secondary thing.
And I think we're in a little bit of a Kickstarter, Indiegogo type bubble. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but it seems like a lot of things are getting funded that I'm surprised about. A lot of things are getting funded that probably really shouldn't be.
Yeah, well, I think as the internet scales access to people, like there's always weird things that people have ideas for, and some people will just resonate with that.
Hmm.
Right? For example, there's a guy on YouTube. This is a little off topic, but he makes videos choking himself. Like, he'll take a MacBook
It's not this
cable.
kind of podcast, just to let you
No,
know.
yeah, it's not.
Yeah, go on.
But I saw it once on a comedy channel. I was like, who the hell would watch this? And he has like a ton of views. He chokes himself with like a belt, like with his own hand, like a MacBook charger cable. You're like who would watch this, right? But the internet makes access where if you like this stuff, hey, you can actually find him, right? And there's another guy that wears like these motorcycle racing helmets, and then he dry humps like a balloon, and in the end, he like pops it by sitting on it. And you're like, who watches this too, right? So it's like, so yeah, you could say it's a bubble, but there probably are enough weird people that, a random project could get supported if he could find them, on a cheap way, the acquisition side of things too. So I think, yeah, I agree with and disagree, but I think as more people get connected on the internet, it's probably not going to go anywhere, and you're just going to see more projects like these that where things shouldn't get funded, but you have to put yourself in perspective. Like, hey, anyone with an internet connection can basically back this project. And I think the media will always flag these weird projects that, hey, how did this guy get funding? Like, oh my God. But I think it's important to realize that, hey, the majority of projects, I think most of them, only like 40% actually get funded, if not less than half. So like it's a good crapshoot in a way, but it's not just like you put up one paragraph and you get 10K.
Yeah, but it sounds like if you put in good amount of work to it, it's a high likelihood that you get funded from what I can tell.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, the risk is distributed across, hundreds, if not thousands of people, right? Like when you look at like something that's like 100K, and the pledge levels are only $100, you're splitting it among 1,000 people. And $100 for me and you, for someone it might be a lot, but overall it's nothing compared to like putting 100K of your own money into a product too. So I think it's easy to say, hey, these things shouldn't get funded, but when you look at the risk, it's actually just like, hey, some people pledge at $1, some people pledge at $20, and if I think a project's cool, maybe I'll give them $20 and see what happens. But if enough people do that, like 1,000 people do that, he's got 20K, right?
Is Kickstarter international or is it just in the US?
As a backer, you can be international, but if you're a project creator, I think it's only like US, UK, like Sweden, Canada, and some limited countries because of the financial regulations. Because when you get money from a crowdfunding campaign, I think there's some regulations on whether it's a gift or like income, and each country has its own kind of rules that they're still trying to figure out as the platform grows.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that kind of what you were saying earlier is basically if you have an idea that you think is really good, there's chances are, I mean, there's 300 million people just in the US, and then you add like the UK and all those other places. hundreds and hundreds of millions of people, the chances are that someone else has that exact same idea and would love to spend the $30, $50, or whatever your product is. They just don't want to actually go out and do the work to make it. So I've never used Kickstarter or Indiegogo, but it sounds like a great way if you're still trying to figure out your idea a little bit.
Yeah, well, it also goes back to customer acquisition that we talked about, right? Like if you have a Kickstarter, it makes a big splash. Whether or not someone buys from you, even if they share it, it's a really cheap way to acquire customers than, say, buying a billboard on Sunset Boulevard or in Cosmo, right? So I think there's different ways to look at this, whether it's through funding, customer acquisition, or developing a product. That I think if you're building something truly new, that you really should look into this. I think, but if you're just selling something like you can buy on Amazon, it's like it's probably not that useful to go on Kickstarter because usually those products on there are kind of more pushing the boundaries or things you've never seen before, and that's kind of what makes it cool to support you. Like you're making something, you're making a dream come true in a way.
So that's the first part of my talk with Terry. And in the second part, we get into some really cool techniques on how you can market your online business totally for free. And we also get into some techniques on how you can do paid marketing, but do paid marketing really well. You don't want to waste a lot of money on paid marketing. You want to make sure that every dollar you spend, you're getting some good ROI. So make sure you come back next Monday and I'll have the second part of my talk with Terry released. And now I want to get into the little soundbite from Michael Jordan. And since my podcast is released every Monday, and Monday's kind of one of those days that people don't want to go to work, the weekend's over, they need a little bit of motivational juice. I want to start every Monday, every episode, having a little quote, a little soundbite, a little story, something like that at the end of the episode to kind of help get those juices flowing, help get you ready to tackle the week, and hopefully make some big changes for the positive. So here's the quote from Michael Jordan.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. And if you did, make sure you hit the big red subscribe button down below. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Twitter. And I release a new video every Monday. And by hitting that subscribe button, you'll get those new videos every Monday. And this is really a podcast. It's also a website. You can check out the website. It's howtodoyour20s.com. I'll put a link right over here as well. And what it's all about is trying to improve your life. And we specifically focus on things that people in their 20s are interested in. So make sure you like the video if you liked it. Subscribe. Like us on Facebook and Twitter, whatever. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again on another video.